In this episode of the Busy Mind podcast, I'm sharing 5 simple strategies for meditating with a hectic schedule and a busy life. So if lack of time has been stopping you from taming your busy mind with mindfulness, this is the episode for you. Plus, I'll share examples and stories from my own life and plenty of ideas for how you can put these strategies to work in yours as soon as you're done listening. I'll also share simple resources for more support, including a free downloadable guide and downloadable mini meditations. I'm Melissa Wheeler, former public school teacher and professional development trainer of mindfulness and emotional intelligence, turned coach and course creator of mindfulness-based stress and burnout relief. But it wasn't all that long ago that I was deep in a state of overwhelm, chronic stress, and totally burnout. Fast forward past so much suffering and lessons learned to the mostly calm, resilient, joyful state of being I have today. One that used to only exist as a wish and a daydream, and one where I get to share the priceless insights from my rewarding journey of healing and growth, knowing I've helped countless others break free from their own suffering to find their own place of peace, regain control, and take their life to the next level. I created the Busy Mind podcast to give you simple, actionable, step-by-step strategies to help you on your own personal journey from stress to strength. If you're looking for relief from overwhelm, stress, or burnout, are on a journey of healing and growth, or want to maximize your potential in a sustainable way, you're in the right place. I'm so glad you're here. Hello, and welcome to the very first episode of the Busy Mind podcast. I'm so excited about our topic for this episode. In this episode, I'm sharing some of my favorite tips and tricks for meditating, even if you've struggled to find time in the past or have a crazy, busy, hectic schedule and feel like you just don't have any time at all. So if that is you, you're in the perfect place. Plus, when you finally do start practicing regularly, even just for a few minutes, it has a way of creating more time and space for more of what matters most to you, for finding inner calm amongst the chaos, and for taming that busy mind of yours. One of the ways it does this is by creating space to think, reflect, and be thoughtful instead of constantly reacting or reacting impulsively. I wanted to share about this topic because one of the most common reasons I hear from people for not meditating, even though they want to, is that they don't have time. And that's probably you as well, since you're here listening. I hear this from folks who have experience with meditation and from total would-be newbies. I heard this from folks I worked with when I was doing professional development trainings around mindfulness and emotional intelligence for a large school district. And I hear it from people in the day-to-day, just in conversation, when they find out what I do for a living and that I meditate regularly. They say things like, "Melissa, that's great, you have time for that," or that you can do that, but I'm just way too busy. There just isn't time in my day. Or my mind is just too busy. So over the years, in wanting to help people figure this out, I started compiling and teaching solutions. Solutions to all of the obstacles and objections people shared with me that stopped them from practicing and experiencing the many powerful benefits of regular meditation practice. And in case you're curious, I'll share the top 10 reasons I've heard folks share as their reasons for not meditating. And then we'll get into the tips and tricks for meditating even if you don't have time. So number 1, the first one is that they don't have time. Number 2, they're too busy. Third, they think they suck at it or just aren't good at it. The fourth one is that they can't sit still enough or are too restless. 5, they've tried it before and it didn't work for them. 6, they have too many other priorities, too many competing priorities. 7, they worry their productivity or performance will drop or they'll lose their edge, that, meditation will make them soft. 8, they feel alone or don't know anyone else who practices. 9, they feel too exhausted, mentally, physically, or both. And 10th, they don't know where to start and they feel overwhelmed. Those are the most common reasons I hear for people not meditating. And if any of those fit for you, please know that there are solutions. So if you feel called to bring meditation into your life, keep going and don't let these reasons stop you. I also want to let you know that I've created a free downloadable PDF, a guide with all of the strategies and tips I'm sharing today listed out, plus more. And I'd love to share it with you. And that way you don't have to just remember everything that I'm talking about. You have a visual guide. So if a visual list would be helpful, go check it out. I'll put a direct link in the show notes below this episode, and you can also find it on my website at melissamwheeler.com in the resources section. And the guide I created for you has 5 additional strategies on top of the 5 I'm sharing here, for a total of 10 hacks to get you meditating and taming your busy mind, even if you don't have time. I wanted to keep this episode nice and short since I know you don't have a lot of extra time on your hands, so I kept it to 5 for this conversation. So make sure to check it out. It's called 10 Simple Strategies for Meditating with a Hectic Schedule. And one last thing before we get to the strategies. Please keep in mind that this podcast is intended for informational and educational purposes. It's not intended to substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. So make sure to consult with your medical professional before making changes to your diet, exercise routine, medical regimen, lifestyle, or mental health care. I'm not a doctor or a clinician. I'm here as a teacher, a coach, an advisor, and as a friend. Okay, here goes. Please know that you can always take what speaks to you and leave the rest. You don't have to do them all. My first strategy is to determine your minimum daily dosage. Decide on a minimum number of minutes a day to meditate and then stick to it. My recommendation is 6 minutes a day as a minimum, but if that's too much, you can start with 1 minute. Everyone can find 1 minute, and if you think you can't, just keep listening and I'll show you how. And if you're wondering why 6 minutes, there's research from Niroga Institute that has shown that practicing a minimum of 6 minutes a day is enough to experience the benefits of meditation. Now, their research was done on a specific form of meditation, their signature body of work called dynamic mindfulness, which I love to practice and teach. But in my experience, this minimum can be applied to other forms of meditation and mindfulness practice too. And a great way to know if it applies to you is to try it out for yourself. So give it a try. And if you're interested in checking out the research I mentioned, you can find it on their website. It's the 2 papers by Jennifer Frank, and I'll also link them in the show notes. It's common to believe that we need to practice for luxuriously long amounts of time in order for it to count. More on that in a moment, but Niroga's research gives us options. Niroga found that the minimum dosage of dynamic mindfulness practice, in order to begin to notice positive benefits, is 15 minutes a day on at least 3 different days a week. And if we apply that to a daily dosage, they found that it comes out to roughly 6 minutes a day. If you do the math, you find it's a total of 45 minutes per week. And if you divide 45 minutes by 7 days, you get roughly 6 minutes per day as a minimum dosage. If you wanted to practice 5 days a week, just on your busiest work days and build it into a routine that way, you could practice 9 minutes a day, 5 days a week, or 11 minutes, 4 days a week, and so on. Keeping in mind, it does need to be on at least 3 different days a week. And I strongly encourage you to practice daily rather than 3 or another number of days in the week. Practicing daily builds the daily habit and integrates it into your lifestyle, which makes it so much less likely to forget and that you'll actually keep going. Now, about practicing for longer amounts of time. Another important thing to note is that practicing 6 minutes a day will get you experiencing some positive benefits, but the more you practice, the more benefits you'll gain. And if you'll just get started with a small, doable, minimum number of minutes a day, many times the positive shifts you notice will give you the momentum needed to keep going and up your practice. There's so many benefits to practicing meditation, and likely you're aware of them, and that's why you're here listening. Things like falling asleep easier, increased inner calm, reduced stress, lower blood pressure, improved awareness, an easier time responding thoughtfully to challenging situations instead of reacting negatively and impulsively, and the list goes on. I know when we're experiencing overwhelm, chronic stress, or just can't seem to catch our breaths amidst endless to-do lists, back-to-back meetings, and overflowing schedules, a few minutes a day is much more doable than, say, a 20, 30, or 45-minute practice, which is what is often recommended clinically or in meditation courses. I do also recommend those longer lengths of practice whenever possible, but I also know that practicing that much isn't perceived as accessible for folks who are chronically overextended. Sometimes starting small is a way to get your foot in the door and a step in the right direction towards what you might need, but aren't able to access at this moment. So, bit by bit. And many times the positive shifts you notice will give you the momentum needed to keep going and up your practice when you're ready. So the key is just keep practicing, just keep going, even if it's just 1 minute a day, and build from there when you're ready. Even though it's not in line with the research I mentioned, I have heard from all kinds of folks that even smaller amounts, even just a few breaths here and there, have made a difference. So be your own research subject and start with at least a few breaths. So what minimum daily dosage do you want to set for yourself? Make a decision and then stick to it. Number 2, the second strategy I'm sharing for meditating even if you feel you don't have time is to chunk it. Practice in smaller chunks of time. If 6 minutes a day is still too much, start with 1 minute and build from there. And if even that is still too much, start with just one breath, which takes about 5 seconds on average. Count 12 breaths and you've completed about a minute of meditation. Then practice in smaller increments or smaller chunks of time at different points in the day. It all adds up and it all counts. If you're going for the 6 minutes a day I talked about in number 1, you can practice 1 minute 6 times a day, or 2 minutes 3 times a day, or 3 minutes twice a day, and so on. You get the idea. And eventually, if and when you do get up to a larger daily dosage, like 15 or 20 minutes a day, this chunking piece may be even more helpful. You can also use what I call mini practices as your chunks of meditation. Some of my favorites are 3 big breaths, some dynamic mindfulness shoulder rolls, and a 5 senses nature break. And if you're not familiar with those, I'm about to share more about each one and then let you know where you can get free downloadable versions. For 3 big breaths, you just take 3 breaths that are slower, longer, and deeper than your regular breaths. If you like, you can press pause and give it a try now. For dynamic mindfulness shoulder rolls, a mindful movement practice from Naroga Institute, you're just going to do a few shoulder rolls or shoulder circles in each direction and add in an inhale as the shoulders go up and back and an exhale as the shoulders come down and then forward, as well as paying attention to what you feel in your body with the movement. For a 5 senses nature break, step outside for a minute or 2 or 6 and use your senses to focus on any nature around you. So, for example, maybe your sense of sight is piqued by a beautiful tree or some hills off in the distance. Maybe your sense of sound is piqued by some leaves rustling in the wind. Maybe your sense of touch is piqued by the fresh air on your skin. Your sense of smell might be piqued by the smell of fresh cut grass or a nearby rose bush. Lastly, there's taste. This one can be a little trickier. You can skip it altogether. And of course, make sure to be safe. Use common sense, and avoid anything that could be poisonous, toxic, or contaminated. So those are just a couple mini practices, but you can also just set a timer for whatever length of time you have. Maybe it's just a minute or 2, and practice your favorite form of meditation. Add it all up as the day goes on and count it towards the minimum daily dosage you set for yourself. And I created another gift for you. Make sure to grab the free downloadable guided audios of these mini practices. I've linked them in the show notes, and you can also visit my website, melissamwheeler.com, and find them in the resources section. I'd love to share them with you. Will you use chunking toward your minimum daily dosage? How will you chunk your practice? The third strategy is to staple it. Make it a routine part of your day by stapling your mindfulness or meditation practice to an already existing daily routine activity. When you attach it or staple it to another activity that you do every day, you make sure you remember to do it and that you don't forget. Then, over a little bit of time, it'll become as routine as brushing your teeth or taking a shower. As an example, you may know about the research from NASA showing that doing something 21 days in a row creates a change in the brain and it becomes a routine habit. And so you may be thinking of some of your own routines to try this out with. Great job, and here's some examples to get you going as well. I came up with several of them, some common daily routines that you might like to staple your practice to. So maybe you'd like to do a little mini practice right when you wake up in the morning. Or maybe you staple your practice before or after brushing your teeth. Or you could do it while warming up the car. I have a friend who staples her practice here. While she warms up her car before heading off to work, she says her prayers and then does her mini practice. She actually inspired me with this one, and I now love to do 3 big breaths while warming up my car. A few more examples are when arriving to work. Maybe before getting out of your car, or if you work from home, it could be right before you sit down at your workstation. Or you could staple your practice before or after eating lunch, if you do take time for lunch. This is another one of my personal favorites. I love to do 3 big breaths or some rhythmic belly breathing, have a moment of gratitude, and then enjoy my meal. And if you don't take time out for lunch, I strongly encourage you to, if at all possible. And if it's not possible, I get it, but I urge you to at least find a few moments midday to take some kind of break. Just for you, no matter how small. Our nervous systems need breaks throughout the day. Making them based around mindfulness will make them even more impactful. Okay, another place to staple your practice could be when you leave work or leave your workstation, as a transition from the workday to the evening. This one can be so nice, like a little ritual for yourself to switch from being on to now being off. You could practice the moment you arrive home after work. It could be before eating dinner. It could be before screen time. If watching a show or scrolling on social media are routines that you have, you could do a little practice before indulging in these. And lastly, you could always staple it to your bedtime, making sure to get in at least a few breaths or a minute or two before turning out the lights. So what's a routine part of your day that you could staple your practice to? Before getting to strategy number 4, I want to share about how I use these strategies as part of my recovery back about almost 20 years ago when I experienced burnout for the first time. I was a really busy public school teacher at a low-income school, teaching at the high school level, as well as coaching sports year-round, both in the fall and in the spring, as well as a few other roles. I would get home from school and practice and meetings exhausted, not having had enough sleep the night before, and dreading all the things I needed to do that evening before collapsing into bed. Make dinner, prep for my classes the next day, write the workouts for practice, all on top of the other tasks of the day, chores and errands and relationships and social time. It was all just too much, and all I wanted to do was collapse and cry. But I started implementing a 5-minute minimum daily dosage. This was before I knew about the 6-minute recommendation, and I stapled it to the moment I got home and walked through the door. I would drop my bags and get into my little spot and do my practice. At first, it was a struggle to get all 5 minutes in. My mind would be racing, thinking about all the things I could or should be doing instead of sitting there, but I kept at it. I had training in meditation and knew about and believed deeply in the benefits and really needed them so badly. Soon I noticed how much more focused and energized I felt just after those few minutes and how much easier it was to get through what I needed to do that night. I was so much more efficient and felt so much better. Eventually, the 5 minutes went by faster and faster, and I craved longer sessions and fit them in where I could, gaining even more benefits. So sharing that just to give you a real life example of how this can work. The fourth strategy is to look to examples of people that are just as busy or busier than you that meditate as role models. Look to them as an example and proof of what's possible and as role models that you can look to for inspiration. If they can do it, you can do it. This helps keep your mind open, focused, and believing that it is possible, because it absolutely is. And if you like, you can use me and the story I just shared as an example. Because you might be thinking, I don't have time to do research like this to find these examples. But it could also be as easy as talking to people in your network or that you work with. Meditation is trending and is really more popular than ever, and often there are people around you who practice, but just don't talk about it for various reasons. You could also do a quick internet search. You could search for well-known blank, fill in the blank, who meditate, and fill in the blank with a profession or situation that you choose. It could be yours or something else. Maybe managers, business owners, caregivers, consultants, executives, teachers, or busy moms. You could search for executives who meditate or busy moms who meditate. Or you could use someone famous you look up to who practices. For starters, and to help get you going, here's a few celebrities who meditate. Oprah Winfrey, host and television producer, practices 20 minutes a day, sometimes twice a day. Ariana Huffington, co-founder of the Huffington Post, does a minute when she wakes up and 20 to 30 minutes a day when she's home. Alicia Keys, singer-songwriter, practices regularly. Leanne Rimes, singer-songwriter, practices regularly. The late Kobe Bryant, professional basketball player, practiced daily in the morning. Mark Benioff, CEO of Salesforce, has a dedicated practice and even has meditation rooms throughout the Salesforce offices, so it's even part of company culture. Jeff Weiner, former CEO of LinkedIn, practices daily. He uses an app. And Hugh Jackman, actor, practices transcendental meditation, also known as TM, twice a day. For me, this one was a game changer in taking my personal practice to the next level, making that jump from 5 minutes a day to much longer. Over time, I took more and more classes and trainings around meditation and emotional intelligence and related topics, and had classmates and colleagues who practiced a lot, much more than me. Some a minimum of 20 minutes twice a day, and others up to an hour. I wondered how they possibly fit it all in with all that they did. They were just as busy with work and life as I was, and actually even busier, with all kinds of other VIP-type responsibilities. And there was just something about them, such a sense of inner calm amidst the chaos, and I wanted that for myself so badly. Eventually, I got there, and being in proximity to folks like that was such a big factor. So what about you? What's one next step you can take toward finding a role model for practicing meditation, even with such a busy life? Number 5, the fifth trick is a mindset shift. Now, you may not want to hear about a mindset shift. You might not think that has anything to do with it, that a lack of time for meditation is all circumstantial, but it really is critical for success with our topic today. Success with anything is 80% psychology, 20% strategy. So even if you have all the best strategies in the world at your fingertips, if your psychology, your mindset, is working against you, those strategies won't make a difference at all. If you believe very deeply that you'll never have time for meditation, you'll find all the ways to make that true. But once you begin to accept that there may be a way for you to have time for meditation, you're so much more likely to find success with it. And you're here. That signifies you're already on your way to the right mindset. And the strategies I've shared make it possible and conceivable. They've already been game changers for hundreds of others I've shared them with. I hope that hearing about them has already helped shift your mindset. And I want you to understand that we all have the same 24 hours in a day. That means there are people busier than you that meditate, as we just talked about in strategy number 4. The fact that others have done it is proof it can be done. You can find time for meditation. You can gain the benefits of meditation practice, no matter how busy you are. I'm confident that if you implement the ideas we've talked about here today, you'll be on your way. So if "I don't have time for meditation" is something you say to yourself regularly, or is a belief of yours, I want you to replace it with something else. You could use the phrase, "I can find time for meditation, no matter how busy I am. There are people busier than me that meditate." Or something similar, whatever language works for you. Take a look at the language you use around this topic and start by changing it to something more accurate and more empowering. Your words reflect your mindset, and your words become your habits, so choose them carefully. And repeat after me if you're able to right now. "I can find time for meditation, no matter how busy I am. There are people busier than me that meditate." Okay, great job, and thank you for listening all the way through with me. And those are my top 5 tips for meditating with a hectic schedule and how to create time for meditation even if you think you don't have any. To recap, those 5 strategies were: number 1, implement a minimum daily dosage, maybe 1 to 6 minutes a day. Number 2, chunk it. Break practice up into manageable chunks. It all adds up. Number 3, staple it to another routine part of your day to ensure that you remember and don't forget. Number 4, look to a role model who meditates even though they're busy, as an example of what's possible. And number 5 is a mindset shift. You can find time for meditation even with your busy life. My personal favorite right now is number 1, the daily minimum dosage. Mine is 6 minutes. And using this one, for me, guarantees I never miss a day. If the day has just gone completely off the rails and all kinds of things were happening that were out of my control, I know I'll do my minimum dosage before bed later that night. It's a last resort, but at least I know it's there. And lastly, if these 5 tips, or the additional 5 shared in my free guide, don't make it so you're able to practice meditation even with your busy life and hectic schedule, time most likely isn't what's stopping you from practicing meditation. It's very likely something else, and if I can help with it, reach out and let me know. You can find all of my contact information on my website at melissamwheeler.com and in the show notes. I hope these strategies are helpful. Thank you so much for listening. And if you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And please leave a review. Your feedback helps us reach more listeners who really need this information. And remember to make sure to grab my free guide that I created with all of these plus 5 more strategies. You can find it by visiting melissamwheeler.com in the resource section, or in the show notes on my website, or in the show notes below where you're listening. It's packed with these and more tips to help you meditate even with a busy life and even if you think you don't have time. Let me know if you want to hear me talk about those additional 5 strategies on a future episode. And for more offerings and episode show notes, visit my website, melissamwheeler.com. There you can see how to join my free private Facebook group where I go live each week with a guided meditation. I'd love to have you join. You'll also see options for one-on-one support and coaching with me. I'd love to work with you. Also follow me on Instagram. I'm Melissa M. Wheeler, MMW. For behind-the-scenes content and updates, I'd love to hear from you there. And lastly, make sure to check out the next episode all about how self-care is not the answer to chronic stress and burnout and what the actual solutions are. I can't wait to connect with you again next time.